The first hidden sign was my street name. Not spoken, not written. Hidden inside a movement that no one else in courtroom 4B had any reason to notice. Elias Voss was answering a question about where he had been the previous evening. Simple testimony. Routine. The kind of thing jurors half listen to while attorneys pretend not to watch their faces. His right hand signed yesterday. His body shifted into walking. And in the space between those two signs, his left hand made a movement that did not belong there. 3 fingers. A sweep. A tap. In formal ASL, it meant nothing. But in tactile signing, and in the private shorthand deaf communities develop the way neighborhoods develop slang, it was not meaningless. It was a marker. A letter number combination. An address. My address. My name is Marcus Cole. I am a court-certified forensic sign language interpreter for the 9th District. For 11 years, I have interpreted depositions, arraignments, preliminary hearings, and murder trials. I have sat 3 feet from men who described what they did to bodies. I have carried their words into English without letting my voice change. That is the job. You become invisible. A conduit. A wire between languages. Current passes through you, but you are not supposed to feel it. I need you to understand that before I tell you what Elias Voss did to me. Because the horror was not that he threatened me. Threats can be reported. Threats have language the court understands. What Voss did was worse. He used the thing I was best at, the thing I had trained my entire adult life to do, and turned it into a room I could not leave. Elias Voss was 36 years old, deaf since birth, charged with the aggravated stalking of 3 women, all professionals in the deaf services community, a social worker, a vocational counselor, an audiologist. The prosecution called it fixation. Voss developed obsessive attachments to hearing women who worked with deaf clients. Then he followed them quietly, for months. He photographed their routines, mapped their homes, drew their windows, documented the exact times their porch lights turned on. The police found notebooks in his apartment filled with sketches so detailed they looked less like drawings and more like instructions. He never touched them. He never contacted them. He watched. He drew. He knew. I had interpreted for Voss once before 4 months earlier, during his competency evaluation. A standard language assessment. Nothing dramatic. Nothing memorable. I asked him questions. He answered slowly. He missed idioms. He needed repetition. I marked him as intermediate ASL. Functional. Limited. The kind of signer who could communicate clearly enough for court, but not fluently enough to manipulate it. I was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not professionally embarrassed wrong. Catastrophically wrong. And I did not understand how wrong until that Tuesday afternoon when Elias Voss sat 3 feet from me in the witness chair and moved his hands in a version of the language so precise, so layered, so quietly advanced that my 11 years of certification felt like a children's workbook. But I am getting ahead of myself. The first sign was the address. The courtroom heard a man describing his daily routine, where he worked, what he cooked, how he spent his evenings. The defense was doing what defense attorneys do, humanizing him, making him smaller, softer, less dangerous. And while everyone else listened to the harmless version of Elias Voss, I watched his hands. That is what my job requires. I cannot look at the judge. I cannot watch the jury. I cannot glance away when something feels wrong. My eyes stay on the signer. Always. So I saw it. Between evening and usually, his left hand folded into that tiny, impossible movement. 3 fingers. A sweep. A tap. It lasted less than a second. On the court camera, it probably looked like a twitch. To anyone else, it was nothing. To me, it was 4217 Ridgemont. I live at 4217 Ridgemont Drive. And as I voiced his official testimony into the microphone, Elias Voss looked directly at me. Not at the attorney. Not at the jury. At me. His face stayed calm. His hands kept moving. And then, beneath the sentence the courtroom was allowed to hear, he signed one more thing. A number. 6. My apartment number. I told myself I imagined it. That is always the first thing you do. You are sitting in a courtroom under fluorescent lights, with a stenographer clicking, attorneys shuffling papers, jurors shifting in their seats, and a defendant signs a movement that looks exactly like your home address. So you make it smaller. A stray motion. A muscle twitch. An itch. A coincidence created by fatigue and pattern recognition. You tell yourself your brain is misfiring because you have been staring at another person's hands for too long. Then he signed my apartment number. Not between words this time. Inside one. The ASL sign for comfortable is a two-handed movement. The dominant hand brushes across the non-dominant palm twice. Voss did it twice. Then added a third brush. Small. Controlled. Almost invisible. If you were watching at conversational speed, you would never catch it. If you were watching the court recording later, you would need to slow the footage down frame by frame. But I was not watching at conversational speed. I was watching at interpreter speed. The speed where you take a visual language apart in real time and rebuild it into spoken English before the silence becomes noticeable. At that speed, the third brush was not extra movement. It was a number. 6. Unit 6. 4217 Ridgemont Drive. Unit 6. My hands kept translating. My mouth kept voicing his testimony. The courtroom heard. In the evenings, I usually feel comfortable at home. I cook, I read. Harmless. Ordinary. Human. My body performed the function it had performed 10,000 times before. But something behind my sternum changed. Not panic. Not yet. Something quieter. The specific internal rearrangement that happens when you realize you are being watched by the thing you are watching. The defense attorney asked about his hobbies. Voss signed. Drawing. Walking. Photography. Standard answers. Clean signs. Appropriate facial grammar. Nothing the court reporter would ever know how to record. But underneath the official testimony, the second channel kept moving. His dominant hand carried the words everyone else was allowed to hear. His non-dominant hand carried something else. A second sentence. A private sentence. A sentence with my name shaped into the silence around it. It was like watching a pianist play one song with the right hand and another, darker song with the left. And the darker song was about my apartment. Not the layout. The details. The water stain above my bathroom ceiling that looks like a dog's head when the light hits it from the hallway. The copy of Siddhartha on the shelf by the front door. Cracked spine. Unfinished. The chip in the kitchen counter near the stove. Small. Curved. Shaped like a comma. The bedroom window that does not lock properly. The strip of painter's tape I used to keep it closed. Blue. Not white. He specified the color. That was the moment I stopped being able to pretend. A lucky guess can find a street. A court record can find an address. But blue tape on a bedroom window is not public information. The courtroom heard a man describing his quiet life. I heard someone describing my home from the inside. My voice did not change. My hands did not shake. I need you to understand that because it is the center of everything that happened next. I did not react. 11 years of training had built a wall between what I see and what I show. A good interpreter does not flinch. A good interpreter does not editorialize. A good interpreter does not become part of the testimony. So I stayed neutral. I stayed invisible. And Elias Voss knew I would. He had counted on the wall holding. He looked at me, not at the attorney, not at the jury, at me. His eyes met mine, which is normal. Signers look at their interpreter. They need the feedback. They need the channel to stay open. But this was different. There was weight in it. Intention. Recognition. He held eye contact for 3 seconds longer than grammar required. 3 seconds is not long anywhere else. In a signed conversation, 3 extra seconds is a room locking from the outside. Then he smiled. Not a smirk. Not a threat. A calm little smile. The smile of someone who had tested a door and found it open. The smile of someone who had finally found the person he was looking for. Here is the thing about forensic interpretation. The trap does not look like a trap. It looks like procedure. It looks like a witness chair, a microphone, a judge, a jury, and one interpreter sitting close enough to see every movement of a defendant's hands. I could not simply stop. Not without cause. I am an officer of the court. If I interrupt testimony, I have to give a reason. Fatigue. Linguistic confusion. A dialect issue. A technical problem with the interpretation. Those are recognized reasons. The defendant is using advanced ASL register switching to describe the inside of my apartment is not. Not to a judge. Not to a jury. Not to a courtroom full of hearing people who already think sign language is just English performed with fingers. And I need you to hear that the way a judge would hear it. It would sound insane. That was the first bar of the cage. The second was the language itself. Sign language is not a manual version of English. It is not one gesture for one word. It is not subtitles made of hands. ASL is spatial, visual, layered. It uses the face, the shoulders, the eyes, the position of the body, the distance between signs, the direction of a movement, the rhythm of a pause. Meaning can happen in more than one place at once. A fluent signer can place one message in the dominant hand and another in the non-dominant hand. One sentence in the face, one in the body, one in the space between signs. To a non-signer, it can look like movement. To another fluent signer, it can be language. Not a code. Not a trick. Language. And Elias Voss knew exactly how much language I could see. I am one of 14 court-certified forensic sign language interpreters in the district. I am the most experienced. He knew that because I told him. 4 months earlier, during his competency evaluation, I introduced myself the way I always do. My name, my certification, my role, my years of experience. A little professional warmth to build rapport. I thought I was making the process easier for him. I was giving him a map. He sat across from me that day and signed slowly, carefully, too carefully. He asked for repetition. He missed idioms. He used simple sentence structures. He flattened himself. And I believed him. I marked him as intermediate, functional, limited, court-appropriate, but not sophisticated. That was what he needed. Not because he lacked language. Because he needed the court to believe he did. He needed them to assign one standard interpreter. Not a specialist team. Not a second interpreter for verification. Not a deaf interpreter. One person. 3 feet away. Eyes locked on him for hours. One interpreter. one witness, one cage, because I cannot look away. That is the part people do not understand. In spoken interpretation, you can look down, you can glance at notes, you can listen while your eyes rest. With sign language, the language disappears the moment you stop watching. If I look away, I lose the testimony. If I miss a movement, I miss meaning. If I react, I contaminate the record. So I had to keep my eyes on him. I had to see everything. And I had to convert it into English without adding myself. Not my interpretation. Not my fear. Not the fact that my own address had just appeared inside his hands. Elias Voss had built a room where my training required me to sit still and receive whatever he chose to show me. And if I told anyone what I was seeing too soon, the room would become evidence against me. Not him. Me. Lunch recess came at 12:06. I went to the conference room assigned to interpreters. I opened the case file again. The stalking charges. The 3 victims. A social worker, a vocational counselor, an audiologist, all hearing, all professionals in deaf services, all women who worked in the narrow space between the deaf world and the hearing world, the same space I work in. My coffee went cold beside my hand. I started reading backward. Detective notes, recovered notebooks, surveillance logs, photographs, sketches, floor plans, daily schedules, the kind of material that makes a person's life look less like a life and more like a building someone plans to enter. Then I found the detail I had missed the first time. Each notebook had a section marked with the same hand shape, a cupped hand near the throat, the ASL classifier for voice, not voice as sound. Voice as representation. Voice as the person who carries you into a world that does not understand you. Under each hand shape, Voss had written the same title, The One Who Speaks for Me. I read it 3 times before I understood. The social worker had translated for him during a benefits appointment. The vocational counselor had interpreted during a job interview. The audiologist had facilitated a medical consultation. Each of them had, at some point, stood between Voss and the hearing world. Each of them had carried his meaning for someone else. Each of them had been his voice. And then he followed them home. I looked through the glass wall of the conference room toward courtroom 4B. Voss was still inside, sitting quietly at the defense table, hands folded, waiting. And for the first time that day, I understood why he had chosen me. The women had been his voice once. I was his voice now. Court reconvened at 1:30 p.m. The prosecution began cross-examination. The prosecutor started with the notebooks, the sketches, the floor plans, the pages of women's lives drawn in ink. Voss answered calmly, cooperatively, almost politely. He said the drawings were art, therapeutic. His therapist had encouraged him to draw as an emotional outlet. The notebooks were journals, nothing more. The courtroom accepted the shape of that answer. The jury wrote notes. The defense attorney nodded. The prosecutor prepared her next question, and I heard something else. The hidden channel had changed. It was no longer describing my apartment. It was no longer proving he had been inside my life. Now, with his hands moving in the clean white light of courtroom 4B, Elias Voss began to confess. Not to the charges. Not directly. Not in any way the court could record. He confessed underneath himself. The official testimony came through his dominant hand. Clear. Controlled. Court-appropriate. But beneath it, his other hand began moving in a register I had never seen in 11 years of forensic work. Present tense. Second person. Directed at me. It felt less like testimony and more like a letter being written against my skin. While the courtroom heard him explain sketching techniques, I received something else. You are watching my hands the way she watched them. The audiologist. She sat across from me in the examination room. She watched my hands. She thought she understood what I was saying. She did not. She heard what she expected. People always hear what they expect. But you are better than she was. You catch things. I need someone who catches things. My voice continued. My mouth shaped his harmless answer for the courtroom. My hands stayed ready. My eyes stayed on him. The prosecutor asked about a specific notebook entry, a floor plan of the social worker's office. Voss signed his answer smoothly. The courtroom heard. I drew the layout from memory because I found the space calming. It was a form of meditation. That was the testimony. That was the record. That was what the stenographer took down. But underneath it, Voss's hands said, she had a plant on her desk. A fern. I drew it 17 times. Each drawing was closer. Not closer to accurate. Closer to the window. I was mapping where I would stand. I mapped all of them. I am very patient. I am the most patient person you have ever interpreted for, Marcus. Marcus. He used my name. Not spoken. Not obvious. Not even fully fingerspelled in a way another interpreter might catch from across the room. He collapsed it into a transitional movement between signs. Fast. Fluid. Almost beautiful. To anyone else, it would have looked like grammar. To me, it was my name placed quietly inside his hands. The way someone whispers your name in a dark room just to prove they know you are there. My voice said, I found the space calming. My mind said, he is confessing. Not accidentally. Not emotionally. Not because he has lost control. He is confessing with control. He is choosing each layer. Choosing what the court hears. Choosing what only I receive. He had selected me as his confessor because I was the only person in the room fluent enough to understand the sin. Then the hidden channel gave me something the prosecution did not have. Something that had never appeared in the file. Something no one in that courtroom knew to ask about. There was a fourth. The interpreter from my preliminary hearing. Young. Nervous. He could not keep up with my signs, so he paraphrased. He made me sound simple. He made me sound slow. He made me sound stupid. He was my voice for 6 hours, and he made me sound like a child. That is worse than people think, Marcus. Being made simple. Being translated into less than you are. I visited him at home 3 times. He had a green door. He had a cat named Miso. He kept a lamp on beside the window even during the day. On the 3rd visit, he saw me. After that, he stopped interpreting. He is not at that apartment anymore. For half a second, the courtroom seemed to lose sound. The prosecutor was still speaking. The judge was still watching. Someone coughed near the back row. A pen clicked. A chair creaked. The ordinary noises of an ordinary trial kept happening around me. But inside the second channel, a 4th victim had just appeared. One the police did not know about. One who had been erased so cleanly from the case that only Voss still carried him. And now I carried him too. The prosecutor moved on. Another question. Another answer. Another clean sentence for the record. My voice kept translating. My hands kept moving. My face stayed neutral. But inside my chest, the wall between what I saw and what I showed began to crack. Not collapse. Not yet. Just crack. A thin, quiet fracture running through 11 years of training. And Elias Voss watched it happen. He watched me hold myself together. He watched me turn his confession into silence. And his hands kept moving. Court recessed at 3:15 p.m. I had 18 minutes. 18 minutes before I had to sit back down 3 feet from Elias Voss. 18 minutes before I had to look at his hands again. I went to the court administrator's office. I kept my walk normal. Not fast. Not urgent. Not the way a man walks when a defendant has just described a missing interpreter in a language no one else can hear. The administrator looked up from her monitor. I asked, casually, collegially, who had interpreted Voss's preliminary hearing. She pulled up the file. David Moreno, contract interpreter. Assigned October 14th. I made myself nod like the name meant nothing. Is he still in the rotation? She typed for a few seconds, then frowned. Looks like he relocated, removed from the active roster in November. No forwarding information. She shrugged. Happens sometimes with contractors. November. 1 month after a 6-hour preliminary hearing with Elias Voss. 1 month after Voss said David had made him sound simple. 1 month after Voss said he visited him at home. 3 times. I thanked her. I walked out slowly. Then I went straight to the men's room, locked myself in the far stall, and called the interpreter referral service. David Moreno, 26. Certified intermediate. Contract court interpreter. I asked when they had last been in contact with him. The coordinator paused. Not a long pause. Just long enough for my stomach to understand before my mind did. That's actually flagged, she said. He didn't formally withdraw. He just stopped responding. We assumed he moved. That was all it took. No missing person report. No welfare check. No formal inquiry. A contract interpreter disappears from the system, and nobody checks because contractors come and go. The machine does not track what it does not employ. David Moreno had dropped out of the world the way a stone drops out of a hand. Silently. Completely. Noticed only by the absence of weight. And Voss had told me. In a courtroom. Under oath. In a language the court could not hear. He had told me where to look. What name to ask for. What silence I would find on the other end of the phone. He had done it because he knew I was the only person in the building who could receive the message. And he knew exactly what the message would do to me. It was taking me apart. Professionally. Psychologically. Precisely. I had 11 minutes before court reconvened. I stood at the sink and looked at my face in the mirror. For a moment I did not recognize it. Not because I looked afraid. Because I did not. My tie was straight. My expression was neutral. My hands were steady under the running water. That was what scared me. Voss had not made me break. He had made me function while breaking. In the mirror, I saw exactly what he wanted me to see. A man who knew too much to sit back down, and too much to stand up. A man whose duty required him to walk back into courtroom 4B, maintain eye contact with a predator, and translate his testimony faithfully. All while receiving, in a second channel no one else could access, the details of what he had done to a young man who had the same job I had. If I stopped interpreting, the record would stop. If I told the judge in open court, the defense would hear it. If I reacted, they would use it. Interpreter misconduct. Emotional compromise. Bias. Psychological instability. A breakdown on the stand. A mistrial. 3 women's cases, the cases the prosecution could actually prove, would collapse because the interpreter had seen something no one else could verify. Voss had designed that. Not guessed. Designed. The way he designed the floor plans. The way he mapped windows. The way he learned routines. He had mapped me too. My training. My composure. My obligation to remain neutral. My need to be believed. My fear of damaging the case. He had found the exact place where professionalism becomes obedience. And he pressed his hands against it. The bathroom door opened. A bailiff stepped in. He nodded at me. "Court's back in 10. I nodded back. Normal. Professional. Invisible. I dried my hands. I straightened my tie. Then I noticed something small in the mirror. On the sink beside me, in the thin film of water near the drain, my finger had traced a shape without my permission. 3 fingers. A sweep. A tap. The address. I had been replaying it with my own hand. I wiped the water away so hard, my knuckles hit porcelain. Then I walked back to courtroom 4B. 3:33 p.m. Defense redirect. The attorney stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and asked Voss to describe his emotional state during the periods of alleged surveillance. The phrasing was careful. Not stalking. Not following. Not watching. Periods of alleged surveillance. Voss lowered his eyes for exactly the right amount of time. Then he signed. The courtroom heard loneliness. Isolation. A deaf man describing what it felt like to move through a hearing world where people looked past him, spoke around him, and decided what he meant before he had finished saying it. It was sympathetic. It was fluent. It was calculated. 2 jurors leaned forward. One tilted her head the way people do when they are trying to feel kind. The official testimony was doing its job. And underneath it, the hidden channel opened again. You went to the bathroom. You checked on David. I watched your face when you came back. Your pupils are dilated. Your breathing changed. You are swallowing before every 3rd sentence. You are interpreting at 94% accuracy now instead of 99. You dropped a classifier in the last answer. You recovered well. But I saw it. You are scared, Marcus. That is natural. But I need you to be scared and precise. I need you to hear all of it. You are the only one who can. For a moment, I almost missed the next official sign. Almost. That was what he wanted. Not a full collapse. Not yet. A measurable decline. A fracture he could observe. He was monitoring my performance in real time. Noting the degradation the way a technician watches a machine under pressure. My breath. My timing. My accuracy. My swallowing. The smallest failures in a body trained not to fail. He could see me coming apart, and he was narrating it to me while I came apart. The defense attorney asked him to explain why he drew people. Voss signed an answer about connection, about loneliness, about wanting to understand the lives of people who had helped him. The courtroom heard remorse. I heard David Moreno. David could not hold it. He broke at hour 4, started paraphrasing, started smoothing my sentences, started making me gentle, making me simple. When someone makes you simple, Marcus, they take the most important thing you have. They take your complexity. They flatten you. David flattened me for 6 hours. Then he went home, and I followed him, because I needed him to understand what it feels like to be reduced. My mouth translated the official testimony. My hands stayed ready. My face stayed empty. But inside, I understood something I did not want to understand. Voss was not confessing because he felt guilt. He was confessing because confession was another form of control. He wanted his crimes held by someone capable of understanding their full structure. Not police. Not jurors. Not lawyers who would reduce him to motive and opportunity. Me. He wanted me to receive him at full resolution. The defense attorney moved to his childhood. His mother. A hearing woman. A woman who had never learned to sign. The question was designed to soften him, and it worked. Voss's official answer slowed. His face changed. His shoulders lowered. He signed about being a child at a kitchen table, watching his mother's mouth move, and understanding only fragments. He signed about birthdays where people laughed before he knew why. He signed about asking questions no one had the patience to answer. The jury softened with him. A woman in the second row wiped her eye. Even the prosecutor looked down at her notes. The courtroom heard pain. The hidden channel said, "My mother could hear. She chose not to learn my language." David could sign. He chose to make my language smaller. You are different. You receive everything. Every sign. Every layer. Every hidden register. You do not flatten me. You do not correct me. You do not make me easier. You are the first person who has ever heard me completely. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what that makes you? I did. And that was the sickest part. I understood perfectly. In the logic of Elias Voss, I was no longer an interpreter. I had become the thing the three women had been. The thing David had been. The person who carried him across the border between his world and everyone else's. The person who held his voice. And in his mind, that created intimacy. A debt. A bond I had never agreed to. A bond I could not break by looking away, because looking away was the one thing my job would not allow. My voice said, "My mother was a warm woman. I wish she had learned to sign. I think we would have been closer." The courtroom heard tenderness. I heard possession. Then Voss made one more movement. So small I almost doubted it. His left hand shifted near his chest. Not a word. Not a name. A marker. The same cupped hand shape I had seen in the notebooks. Voice. Then his index finger turned. Not toward himself. Toward me. My voice. The jury saw a grieving man. The judge saw a cooperative witness. The defense attorney saw a case softening in real time. I saw a man claiming ownership in a language no one else could hear. And he smiled without moving his mouth. 4:15 p.m. The defense attorney looked at his notes for a moment longer than necessary. Then he closed the folder. No further questions. The room shifted. Not visibly. Not dramatically. But everyone felt the trial exhale. The judge looked toward the witness stand, then toward me. "Mr. Cole, does the witness have anything to add?" This is a standard procedural moment. Nothing more. The interpreter relays the question. The witness says no. The judge dismisses the jury. Court adjourns. That is how it is supposed to happen. I turned back to Voss. He was already looking at me. His hands rose. The official answer was simple. No, thank you. Clean. Polite. Appropriate. The kind of answer that disappears from memory the moment it is spoken. But beneath it, in the last signs I would ever interpret for Elias Voss, the hidden channel said, "You held." I was not sure you would. The others broke. David broke. The women looked away. But you held. Because you understood what breaking would cost. 3 women's cases. My conviction. The record. The jury. The whole room. You did the math in your head, Marcus. And you chose to suffer rather than let me win. That is why you are different. The others were my voice. You are my witness. I have been confessing to you for 4 hours, because a confession only matters if someone worthy receives it. Go home tonight. Think about what you carry now. Think about David. Think about the blue tape on your window. Think about the fact that I knew which side of your bed you sleep on and chose not to tell you until now. My breath stopped for half a second. His hands did not. Decide what kind of man holds a confession and says nothing. Then the second channel closed. No flourish. No smile. No final threat the court could recognize. Just his hands lowering gently to his lap, like he had finished a prayer. The judge dismissed the jury. Court adjourned until Thursday. Chairs scraped. Folders closed. The stenographer removed her hands from the machine. The bailiff opened the side door. The world resumed its ordinary shape. I stood, collected my notes, put my pen in my jacket pocket, nodded once to the clerk, and walked out of courtroom 4B the way I had walked out of 1,000 courtrooms. Quietly, neutrally, invisibly. The hallway was too bright. Fluorescent lights hummed above the polished floor. An attorney passed me discussing lunch plans. A clerk laughed at something on her phone. Someone nearby complained about parking. The vending machine accepted $1 with a soft mechanical click. The world was performing its ordinary Tuesday, and I was standing inside it carrying 4 hours of hidden confession from a man who had mapped my home, studied my breathing, measured my failure, and claimed me as his witness. For 30 seconds I did nothing. I stood beside the courtroom door with my notes in my hand and felt the weight of what he had placed inside me. Not evidence. Not yet. A burden. A private burden. That was what he wanted. He wanted me to carry him home. He wanted his confession living inside the only person who could understand it. He wanted the secret to become a room we shared. And that was where Elias Voss made his mistake. He had profiled me the way he profiled the others. He studied my habits, my training, my composure, my silence, my professional reflex to remain neutral. He understood exactly how much pressure I could take before the wall cracked. He understood my weaknesses, but he misunderstood my profession. He thought I had only 2 choices: break during testimony and give him a mistrial, or carry the confession home in silence and become the witness he wanted. His witness. His keeper. His chosen container. But there was a third possibility, one he had not considered. A forensic interpreter is not just trained to translate. We are trained to document, to preserve meaning, to distinguish language from noise, to explain how communication happened when the people in power could not perceive it. Voss had spent 4 hours using my fluency against me. He forgot that fluency cuts both ways. I did not need the court to have heard him. I only needed to prove that language had occurred, and I knew how. Because Elias Voss, for all his brilliance, all his patience, all his meticulous observation of hearing professionals, did not actually understand how we work. He understood our silence. He understood our discipline. He understood our fear of becoming visible. But he did not understand our procedures. He did not understand what an interpreter does after language passes through him. He records what was said, even when no one else heard it. I went to the judge's chambers at 4:47 p.m. I remember the time because I wrote it at the top of the first page. 4:47 p.m. 17 minutes after Elias Voss lowered his hands. 32 minutes after he told me to decide what kind of man holds a confession and says nothing. I asked the clerk for a closed meeting with Judge Okafor and ADA Brennan. My voice sounded normal. That was important. I said I had supplementary interpretive observations from the defendant's testimony that required immediate disclosure under my professional and legal obligations. Not fear, not accusation, not panic. Observations, disclosure, obligations, words the system understands. The judge let me in. ADA Brennan was already there, standing beside the long table with a legal pad in one hand and a coffee she had not touched in the other. Judge Okafor sat behind his desk. He looked tired, not unkind. Just tired in the way judges look tired after spending all day watching people turn suffering into procedure. "Mr. Cole," he said, "what is this regarding?" I sat down. I placed my folder on my knees, and I made myself do the one thing Voss had not prepared for. I did not tell them how it felt. I did not say he had been inside my apartment. I did not say he had stalked me. I did not say he had claimed me. I did not even say he confessed. Not first. Emotion would have ruined me. That was what Voss was counting on. He wanted the only available language to be fear. He wanted me shaking, contradicting myself, sounding impossible. A frightened interpreter describing secret messages in a courtroom full of people who had heard nothing. That version of me would have become useful to him. Interpreter misconduct, emotional compromise, bias, breakdown, mistrial. So I gave them the version he had not built a defense against. I gave them analysis. I opened the folder. My hands were steady when I removed the pages. That scared me more than shaking would have. I said, "The defendant's testimony contained a parallel communicative channel utilizing non-dominant hand classifiers, spatial reference shifts, facial grammar, and paraverbal markers consistent with advanced ASL register switching." Judge Okafor did not interrupt. ADA Brennan's pen stopped moving. I continued. This secondary channel conveyed content materially different from the primary testimony I voiced for the court. The content was not incidental movement, nor was it gestural noise. It was linguistically structured, internally consistent, and directed at me as the receiving interpreter. The room was very quiet. Quiet in a different way than the courtroom. No stenographer. No jury. No paper shuffling. Just the low hum of the air vent and the small sound of ADA Brennan's thumb tightening against her pen. I documented the secondary content in written English. I said, time-stamped against the court recording, with gloss notation for the relevant ASL structures. I am disclosing it as a supplementary interpretive record pursuant to my professional and legal obligations. Then I placed 11 pages on the desk. Handwritten. Time-stamped to the minute. Every hidden sign I could preserve. Every shift. Every classifier. Every embedded name. Every place where Voss had spoken under himself. 11 pages of a confession the court had not heard, but I had received. ADA Brennan picked up the first page. She read silently. Then the second. By the third page, she had stopped leaning against the table. By the fifth, she had stopped breathing in a way I recognized. The same way I had stopped breathing at 1:47 p.m. when Elias Voss signed my apartment number. She looked up. He confessed. I kept my voice level. He embedded confessional content with informally appropriate testimony using advanced register switching techniques that are linguistically documented but not widely understood outside the deaf community and the interpreting profession. The words felt cold in my mouth. Useful. Safe. True. The embedded content includes references to a potential fourth victim, a contract interpreter named David Moreno, and specific location details I have documented on page 9. Judge Okafor reached for the pages. He read slower than Brennan. More carefully. He went back twice. Once to the description of my apartment. Once to the section about David. Then he removed his glasses and looked at me. Mr. Cole. His voice had changed. Not softer. Sharper. Are you telling me the defendant conducted an entire secondary conversation during sworn testimony that only you could perceive? I looked at him. Then at ADA Brennan. Then at the 11 pages on the desk. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to say the sentence exactly as it was. Yes, Your Honor. My throat tightened, but my voice held. He conducted a secondary conversation during sworn testimony. He used it to intimidate me, to describe my residence, to disclose knowledge of a possible fourth victim, and to embed confessional content beneath the testimony I was required to voice for the court. Judge Okafor looked back at the pages. "And you interpreted all of it?" I thought of Voss's hands. The fern. The blue tape. David Moreno's green door. The way he had signed my name like a whisper in a dark room. I said, "Yes, Your Honor." Then I added the only sentence that mattered. I interpreted every word of it. A pause. That's my job. They found David Moreno on Thursday. Not in the place Voss described. Of course not. Voss was too careful for that. He had never given me a location clean enough to become a confession on its own. He gave me fragments. A green door. A cat named Miso. A lamp left on beside a window. A preliminary hearing date. A month David disappeared from the interpreter rotation. The kind of details that mean nothing separately. But together, they made a shape. Investigators used the hidden confession to build a search radius. Not a place. A radius. A circle drawn around absence. And inside that circle they found what Voss had left behind. Not a body. Not blood. Something colder. Evidence of sustained occupation. An empty rental unit across from David's old apartment. A chair positioned near a window. A stack of cheap sketch paper. Pencil shavings in a coffee mug. Photographs taken through blinds. Drawings of the same hallway from different angles. Different times of day. Different levels of light. One page showed David's front door. Green. Another showed the cat sitting inside the window. Miso. Voss had not lied. He had simply told the truth in pieces sharp enough to cut, but too small to hold. David was alive. That should have made it easier. It did not. He had relocated. No. Fled. That was the better word. After the third time he saw Voss outside his apartment, David changed his number, left the profession, and moved 3 states away. He works at a hardware store now. He does not interpret anymore. He told investigators he had reported the surveillance 8 months earlier. He gave the police Voss's name. He gave dates. Descriptions. He told them he was afraid. The report had been filed, then forgotten. Because David was a man. Because Voss was deaf. Because the system did not know what to do with a stalking case it could not hear. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. A stalking case it could not hear. The hidden confession changed everything. It corroborated details from all 3 women's cases that the prosecution had never been able to prove through physical evidence alone. The fern on the social worker's desk. The audiologist's examination room. The vocational counselor's parking routine. The angle of windows. The times of lights. The little private facts people do not notice until someone else has noticed them too closely. The defense filed for a mistrial. Of course they did. Interpreter misconduct. Prejudice. Speculation. Emotional compromise. A hidden conversation conveniently discovered by the one man who claimed to understand it. I read the motion twice. I knew how it sounded. That was the part one hated. Voss had chosen his weapon well, but Judge Okafor denied the motion. He ruled that my supplementary interpretation constituted a valid linguistic record, not an emotional breakdown. The court recording was reviewed, frame by frame. A second certified interpreter was brought in, then a deaf interpreter, then a linguistic expert from the state university. They did not catch everything. No one could without having been the intended receiver. But they caught enough. Enough secondary movement. Enough spatial shifts. Enough non-dominant hand classifiers. Enough proof that Elias Voss had been signing beneath himself. And the most important part was this. His sophistication became evidence against him. The hidden channel proved he had deliberately underperformed during my competency evaluation. He had not been limited. He had been hiding. He had reduced himself so the court would underestimate him. That showed strategy, premeditation, control, the exact things his defense needed the jury not to see. Elias Voss was convicted on all 3 stalking charges. He was also convicted of witness intimidation for the hidden channel directed at me. The judge cited my supplementary report during sentencing. 11 pages. Handwritten. Time-stamped. The words Voss thought he had placed inside one person became part of the official record. That should have felt like justice. Some of it did. But justice is not the same as relief. Relief removes weight. Justice only tells you the weight was real. I was called to testify at the sentencing hearing. By then, courtroom 4B felt different. Not safer. Just familiar in a way I did not want anything that hurt me to become familiar. The same fluorescent lights. The same seal behind the judge. The same rows of benches. The same distance between the witness box and the defense table. Only this time, I was not sitting beside Voss. I was facing him. He sat with his hands folded in front of him. Still. Quiet. Contained. For the first time, another interpreter was present. Reeves. A colleague I trusted. He stood where I had stood, ready to interpret my testimony for the defendant. I looked at Reeves first, then at Voss. Voss looked back at me. His hands did not move, but his eyes had the same quality they had carried on Tuesday. Weight, intention, recognition, as if he still believed there was a private room between us, as if he still believed I would step inside it if he waited long enough. The prosecutor asked me to describe what happened during his testimony. I answered. I described the hidden channel. I described the apartment details, the blue tape, the green door, David Moreno, the confessional content embedded beneath formally appropriate answers. I described 4 hours of sustained psychological assault conducted in a language the courtroom could not access. Reeves interpreted for Voss. Cleanly. Professionally. Accurately. Every word I spoke passed through Reeves's hands and returned to Voss in the language he had tried to own. Voss watched him, then watched me, and then I did the thing I had planned since Tuesday. I signed my own testimony while I spoke it. Simultaneously. Full ASL. Full English. Every sentence delivered in both languages at the same time. Not because the court needed me to. Reeves was already there for that. I did it because Voss needed to see it. He needed to see my hands say what my voice was saying. He needed to watch his private channel become public. He needed to understand that the language he had used to isolate me did not belong to him. It never had. I signed the word intimidation. I spoke the word intimidation. I signed hidden channel. I spoke hidden channel. I signed David Moreno. I spoke David Moreno. I signed blue tape. I spoke blue tape. Each phrase crossed the room twice. Once through sound. Once through sight. There was no second layer. No private meaning. No secret chord or under the testimony. Only language made visible. Language held in the open. Language refusing to be his weapon. Voss watched my hands. I watched his face. At first he gave me nothing. No anger. No fear. No shame. Only stillness. Then I described the moment he signed my name. The way he folded it into a transition. The way he placed it where only I could see it. I signed that too. Slowly. Deliberately. For the court. For Reeves. For the record. For him. And for the first time in 4 days, Elias Voss's expression changed. It was not rage. It was not defeat. It was recognition stripped of control. He had not been understood on his terms. He had been documented. There is a difference. He had spent years turning people into private witnesses. People who carried him. People who heard him alone. People who could be followed, isolated, frightened, and made silent. But now the private thing was no longer private. The channel was no longer hidden. The language had witnesses. I finished my testimony. My hands lowered. My voice stopped. For a moment, no one moved. Then Judge Okafor thanked me. Reeves interpreted it. Voss did not look at him. He kept looking at me. And I understood then that he had wanted to be seen. Not partly. Not politely. Not simplified into motive, diagnosis, or loneliness. Fully. He thought being fully seen would make him powerful. He thought it would make him permanent. But he was wrong. Being seen did not save him. It removed the place where he had been hiding. He had not been seen before. Not fully. Not by someone who could hold it. Now he had. And the room did not belong to him anymore. I still interpret. That surprises people when they hear the story. They expect me to say I left the profession, that I could not sit across from another signer, that hands became frightening to me. They did not. That matters. The language was never the monster. ASL had carried grief through me. Jokes. Apologies. Testimony. Birth certificates. Divorce petitions. Last chances. Love. For 11 years, I had watched people fight to be understood in rooms that were not built for them. Elias Voss did not make the language monstrous. He used something beautiful with monstrous intent. There is a difference. I went back to work the following Monday. Courtroom 7A. A contract dispute. 2 attorneys arguing about a parking easement with the intensity of men defending a border in wartime. The plaintiff was deaf, older, nervous. He signed slowly, clearly. One channel. No layers. No hidden confessions. No private sentence moving beneath the public one. Just a man trying to explain where his neighbor kept parking a truck. Halfway through, he lost his place. His hands paused in the air. His eyes went to mine, embarrassed. I smiled at him. Not much. Just enough. I signed back, gently, that he was doing fine. And he was. He was doing fine. So was I. At least in the ways the court could measure. I changed my locks that night. All of them. Front door. Back door. Mailbox. Storage unit. I replaced the latch on my bedroom window. Then I taped it anyway. White tape now. Not blue. I stood there for a long time after I pressed it down, staring at the strip across the frame. A stupid, ordinary thing. Tape. Adhesive. Plastic. But the color mattered. I needed one detail of my apartment to belong to me again. I finished Siddhartha. I do not know why. Maybe because he had seen it unfinished. Maybe because leaving it that way felt like letting him keep one accurate fact about me. So I sat on the floor beside the shelf by the front door and read the rest of it in one sitting. The cracked spine gave way near the end. A few pages loosened. I kept reading. The next morning, I filed an amended competency evaluation for Elias Voss. I documented his actual fluency level. Native. Advanced. Register fluid. Capable of simultaneous layered communication, deliberate underperformance, and context-specific linguistic masking. Then I wrote a 3-page addendum explaining how my initial assessment had failed. Not because I lacked skill, because routine had made me arrogant, because a heavy caseload had made me efficient, because efficiency can become blindness when it starts mistaking familiar patterns for truth. I had allowed Elias Voss to become exactly as small as he wanted me to believe he was. That failure was mine. I submitted the report to the certification board with a recommendation that court competency assessments be restructured to test for deliberate underperformance. Not just what a signer can do when they cooperate, what they may be hiding when they do not. They are considering it. That is the phrase institutions use when something is true but expensive. They are considering it. I think about David Moreno sometimes. More than sometimes. A man who was someone's voice for 6 hours and then stopped being anyone's voice at all. A man who left the profession because he was followed home, because he reported it, because nothing happened, because the system did not know what to do with fear unless it arrived in a form it already recognized. I called him once. He did not answer. I listened to the ringing until the voicemail began. Then I hung up. I did not leave a message. I do not know what I would have said. Maybe I held. Maybe I am sorry you had to break. Maybe he was wrong about you. Maybe nothing. Maybe just breathing. Two interpreters listening to the silence between languages. That small space where meaning exists before it becomes a sign, before it becomes a word, before someone else decides what it means. I think about Voss's hands. I will always think about Voss's hands. The precision, the fluency, the control, the beauty of a language used as a weapon. That is the part one still do not know how to say cleanly. Because he was, in the strictest technical sense, the most skilled signer I have ever interpreted for. I hate that this is true. I hate that part of me can still recognize the elegance of what he did while reviling the purpose of it. Professional admiration and disgust can exist in the same breath. I have stopped trying to separate them. Some things you carry without organizing them. That is the cost. Not fear. Fear would be simpler. Fear has shape. You can name it. You can point to it. You can say, I am afraid of courtrooms now. I am afraid of defendants. I am afraid of hands. But that is not what he left me with. He left me with knowledge. The knowledge that expertise is not armor. Sometimes it is a keyhole. The thing you spend your life building, the thing that makes you exceptional, can become the exact place someone enters. Being the best at your job means you are the most capable of being harmed by someone who understands what your job requires. I still sit 3 feet from signers. I maintain eye contact. I watch their hands. I translate their words without adding my own. But I do not watch the way I used to. I used to watch for meaning. Now I watch for absence. For the movement that should not be there. For the pause placed half a second too carefully. For the hand that finishes a sentence the other hand did not begin. For fluency pretending to be limitation. For silence wearing grammar. I am still the best interpreter in the 9th District. I say that differently now. Not with pride. Not exactly. With responsibility. Because the next time a defendant signs below his ability, I will know. The next time someone makes himself smaller in front of me, I will ask who benefits from the reduction. The next time a hand moves beneath a sentence, I will not tell myself it was nothing. Not because I am afraid. Because I finally understand what I should have understood from the beginning. Language is not just a bridge between minds. It is a door, and it opens both ways. That should be the end of the story. For a while, I thought it was. Then, 3 weeks after sentencing, Reeves sent me a copy of the hearing footage. He said the board wanted one more review. Routine. Administrative. Nothing urgent. I watched it at my kitchen table. White tape on the bedroom window. Siddhartha closed on the shelf. All the lights on. I watched myself testify. I watched my hand speak with my voice. I watched Voss sit still at the defense table. Then I watched it again. On the second pass, I saw something I had missed. Not from Voss, from Reeves. It happened when I signed the word witness. A tiny delay in his interpretation. Less than half a second. Then his non-dominant hand shifted. 3 fingers. A sweep. A tap. Not my address. Not exactly. A structure. A marker. A door left open. I rewound the footage. Watched it again. Then again. Reeves had not noticed himself doing it. I could tell by his face. His expression never changed. His eyes stayed on me. Professional. Neutral. Invisible. I closed the laptop. I sat very still. Because the most frightening thing Elias Voss ever taught me was not that language can hide a second message. It was that, once a door has opened inside your mind, you can never be completely sure which side the next sign is coming from. And maybe that is the part that stays with us. Not the courtroom, not the confession, not even the man who turned language into a weapon. It is the thought that the thing we are best at can also become the place where we are most exposed. The habit, the skill, the kindness, the patience, the part of us people depend on. Sometimes the world does not attack our weakness. Sometimes it studies our strength first. So pay attention to the spaces where you are most useful, the places where people always expect you to stay calm, to understand, to carry the message, to keep translating pain that was never yours. Because some doors only open for the people trained to see them. And once they open, you do not forget what came through.